Hello friends, hope you're all well today. I actually just wanted to come to you with a really inspiring story, to be honest. So we have here a young lad called Austin Appleby, 13 years old, and he's just saved his entire family. Now, they were going kayaking and they had some inflatable paddle boards, and they were close to the shore, at the west. Where was it? This particular place had Quindalup, just south of Perth. And as it says here, they were pushed offshore by severe winds and drifted further and further out west into the sea. And obviously, the moment that happens, it's becoming life-threatening for everyone involved. They didn't have the proper equipment and they were just left out there afloat. Now, it was the mother and her 3 children. And as she points out here, Joanne says, I knew he was the strongest and that he could do it. And obviously she had to stay put where she was because she couldn't abandon her 2 youngest and most vulnerable. And so it's an impossible situation. And this young lad, 13 years old, with his kayak, was spent 4 hours having to get back to shore in terrible weather. And it's just such an inspiring story of fortitude and bravery. It goes on to point out here that initially setting off in the kayak, Austin had to abandon the vessel after it took on too much water in the rough conditions. And then about 2 hours into his 4-hour swim, he ditched the life jacket he was wearing as well. And so with no flotation whatsoever, this young 13-year-old boy, and as it points out here, was doing breaststroke, freestyle, backstroke, just anything that he could to keep going and save his family's life. And one of the really poignant things when you hear Austin's retelling of it, which I haven't included only because it's about 5 minutes long, and I didn't want to play the whole thing for you, but it's out there and you can go find it if you want to hear it from him. One of the things that was most remarkable about it was just seeing a young boy possess a wisdom far beyond his years. And, as it reminded me a lot of in Phantom Menace in Star Wars, when Qui-Gon Jinn says, your focus determines your reality. And that's exactly what this young lad did through choosing the things that his mind was focusing on and being actively conscious of the fact that should he sway away from them and think about the negative things, that it had, a correlatory effect with the chances of his family getting to safety. And so, whilst simultaneously being battered by rough seas and having nothing to float with, this young lad basically swam for 2 hours. And, it's amazing when you hear him, the things that he's thinking about as he does it. He talks about the fact that he was recalling Thomas the Tank Engine, and fond childhood memories of those sorts of things, in happier times, and his love for his family, for his mother, for his siblings. And though it's not reported on by The Guardian here, oddly enough, he also spoke about the fact that one of the most important things that kept him going was his faith, his love of God, and the fact that he knew that God was supporting him during that moment of trial. And ultimately, all of these things together, and the genuine stoicism of his mind and the love for his family, made him achieve something that would have been pretty... I can't think of many other 13-year-olds who would have been able to have achieved something like this. And the other thing to say is that's not the end of the story. Once he finally arrived ashore, he also had to run an extra 2 kilometers, it says here, to his family's accommodation, using his mother's phone to call emergency services as well. So from that sheer exhaustion of having to swim, he then also had to run for 2 kilometers to save his family. And the other thing as well, of course, is that by this time, I don't really know, what seasons are like in Australia. I've heard some kooky stuff that happens there. But by 6 p.m. as well, I imagine that it was getting dark. And so this time of year. And so for his family, there would have been, if they're out there much longer, they're going to be lost in darkness. It's going to be a hell of a lot harder to find them. And so every moment counts. And this is the thing that I really want to press, because there is an important factor that The Guardian are missing from their story here, which is that one of the things that Austin said in passing when he was recounting what happened was that when he finally arrived on shore, he found it difficult getting a phone because so many of the people on the shore were foreign, and he wasn't able to communicate the severity of the situation to them and what it meant and the peril that his family were in. And so he lost precious time. I mean, fortunately, it wasn't too late, but this is a part of the point, right? This could have all gone disastrously wrong purely off the back of having to explain the situation to people in his own country who don't speak English. Now, I've seen a lot of people saying different things and trying to embellish this and say, they were all foreigners. It's like, well, he said a lot, he said a lot of foreigners. So there were obviously some people there. And also, it's a beach in Australia. I'm sure it's entirely conceivable that many of them were South Asian tourists and, people from all over the place who obviously didn't feel the need to, brush up on their English in order to go and sit on the beach somewhere. We've all been there in other languages doing that. But given the demography of Australia and the change that's been thrust upon it recently, I just simply don't have a way of determining that. And the fact of the matter is, whether they be tourists or just domestic residents, the point is still that is highlights the danger of not being able to communicate with people in English in your own country. And this is something that we see across many of our social services now when there are emergencies, when we're trying to get to people. I've heard horror stories about, fortunately, as I say, this went very well. Austin's family, he managed to save them. But I've heard other stories, in the past where such a happy ending hasn't been possible because precious time has been lost trying to explain to people the seriousness of the situation in a language that they don't understand and who really shouldn't be in those positions of responsibility, whether that be translators in the NHS or whether it be trying to get something across on the phone to someone in something that you've got to do in your daily life in business. But this is not the main story here, and I don't want to use this purely as an excuse to highlight some of the problems with multiculturalism. This is fundamentally a story of the bravery of young Austin, and The Guardian do actually quite an interesting bit here where they talk about other examples of just seeming super strength where people have rushed through a moment of, great trial. And there's one here, it says, there have been other reports of preternatural strength. In 2013, 2 teenage girls in Oregon reportedly lifted a 1,360 kilogram tractor off of their father's chest. In 2016, another US teenager lifted a car to save her father, while 16-year-olds reportedly did the same thing in 2019. And this phenomenon is sometimes being referred to as hysterical strength, though the origin of the term is unclear. And so it just really does speak to the remarkable strength of the human character, and obviously Austin's character first and foremost, that they are able to do these things, to achieve something that seems impossible when up against it, and it's the difference between saving the people that you love and the world that you love. And so I've just found this entire episode incredibly inspirational. What a brave young man Austin Appleby is, and I hope he and his family live a very wonderful and a very happy life together, because they are clearly made of great stuff. But this entire story is a testament to the power of the human mind as well, and its ability to override the weakness of the body. It goes on to say that Austin was a very strong swimmer as it was. But yeah, it's if you can be a strong swimmer, you can be very athletic, but with a weak mind, that may not see you through. And so, God bless Austin's family for raising him to be such a strong and incredible boy.